All right. So we have the new LSAT writing sample, and you asked for listeners to submit their writing sample to the show for us to critique. Someone did that. Are you ready to read this?
I am. I think maybe we should first read a little bit of the directions just so we can talk about how new LSAT writing is structured. And then
Absolutely.
we can go through this submission and we can, say pros and cons. Here's what we think you did that followed the directions, and maybe here's what we think you did that missed the mark. Hopefully, not too much of that. But it says the following task is designed to measure your ability to write an argumentative essay. You will be presented with a debatable issue identified in the key question, along with different perspectives that provide additional context for the issue by introducing various claims that have been made within that debate. You will then write an argumentative essay in which you take a position within this ongoing conversation while addressing at least one of the arguments and ideas presented in the other perspectives. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the thing that is different here, because the old LSAT writing was an argumentative essay, new LSAT writing gives you these perspectives and requires that you cite the perspectives.
Hmm.
I don't know that I see any other differences.
Yeah, it seems a little more open form, right? Because you have multiple perspectives, but you're still arguing for a particular view. I guess you can argue for a view that's outside of those perspectives.
I think you can, but it does specifically say that you should uh, address at least one of the arguments and ideas presented in the other perspectives. I mean, that's in the top of the directions there. I think you probably could ignore several of the perspectives if you wanted to. You maybe just need to cite one of them. So this particular prompt, it's got a paragraph that says the purpose of college. The principal aim of an undergraduate liberal arts education has traditionally been to cultivate a student's understanding of a broad range of important areas of knowledge, from the fine arts to the sciences, philosophy, language, economics, dash. These things have been seen as crucial to understanding and participating in the larger world beyond the classroom. So they're giving you a reading comprehension test right off the bat here with just the prompt by giving you can I do a quick word count on that?
Yeah, don't write
Don't write like
your
that.
sample writing the way they give you the prompt.
I
Wow.
was trying for a word count, but the browser wasn't giving it to me. So anyway, onward.
Yeah.
Some, however, believe that this kind of education has failed to provide students with the practical skills necessary to succeed in an increasingly competitive and career-focused society, comma, suggesting we need to reconsider what university programs should look like. Such proposals are often framed as a pragmatic response to trends in the economy and predictions about the skills, knowledge, and training that will best serve students' career readiness. Given this proposed shift in emphasis towards skills-based education, it's worth considering what the overall goal of an undergraduate education should be. Okay, so there's some background about the purpose of college, and apparently there's a move towards skills-based education. The key question now, and this is the question that you really have to answer, key question: to what extent do colleges and universities serve their students' best interests when they emphasize career preparation? Then it says, read and carefully consider the following perspectives. Each suggests a particular way of thinking about the issue captured in the key question. You have 15 minutes for pre-writing, where you're supposed to read and take notes. Then you have, I believe, 35 minutes to actually write an argumentative essay in response to the key question, where, again, you have to address one or more of the perspectives presented in the task, but you do not need to address each of the perspectives. Use your own judgment in deciding which ideas to address and how many. Blah, blah, blah. You may incorporate any knowledge or experiences you might have regarding the issue, your own values, and your critical evaluation of the arguments and ideas contained in the other perspectives. So, very wide prompt compared to the old LSAT writing, which was like, here's a bunch of facts. The example that I remember was there's a town that's considering, do we build the downtown ballpark or do we build the tire factory?
Mm-hmm.
And our goal is to revitalize our downtown area and also to get jobs. And the facts, it was like a real short fact pattern, right? There was like
Mm-hmm.
one paragraph about the tire factory and one paragraph about the ballpark. And it was like, well, the tire factory is going to make bad smells downtown, but it's going to get really good long-term jobs.
Yeah.
The ballpark is going to really attract a lot of people to the downtown, but only 80 days a year.
Mm.
Also, after the initial construction project is done, the jobs that are going to be created are not that great of jobs.
Hmm.
And you were supposed to pick a side and advocate for one side over the other. That was a very formulaic prompt because it was just, what are the good things about the plan I'm going to pick? What are the bad things about the plan I'm not going to pick? Write the essay, right? Print it. This is going to give you there's 4 different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an
And
excerpt.
your own.
Right. It's an excerpt from a career advice blog, an excerpt from a university's promotional brochure, an excerpt from a textbook on the sociology of education, and an excerpt from a journal on higher education. So it seems like 2 of those are like academic. One of them is a sales thing, the university's promotional brochure, and one of those is a career advice blog. You're supposed to scan those, quote at least one of those, and optionally put in any of your own shit that you want. Perspectives from your life, your own moral compass. I mean, seems like you could say just about anything. Before we get into the actual responses, you have anything, any ideas, any thoughts about this essay?
I
Or,
do. It's a
yeah.
a wild speculation, but when you think about the purpose of testing, what you're trying to do is you're trying to separate students on some sort of spectrum so that you can decide who's better and who's worse, who you want to accept, who you want to reject. And I wonder if the old writing prompt, which was so narrow and so formulaic, made it hard to distinguish top writers because the right solution was probably very similar. So they just got a bunch of people. I'm thinking schools, especially at the top, at the applicants that they're considering, they just said, hey, all these writing samples are essentially the same.
Well, they
There's no way
should
to.
have. Yeah, and they totally should have been, right? I mean, in the tire factory versus downtown ballpark example, you either had to write an essay that said, we should build the tire factory because the jobs are long-term jobs. This is going to do a much better job of reaching our goal of providing fixing the economy of our town or whatever. We should not pick the downtown ballpark because it's only going to be active 80 days a year and it'll be a ghost town the other 200 and whatever. Not only that, but the jobs are not as good of jobs. Hot dog vendor 80 days a year is not as good as tire factory job. Submit. Or that was one option, right? The other option
or you
was,
take the other side. Yeah. And in both cases, you have to address the weaknesses, but it would be weird to leave any of those facts out. That's all it was.
right.
How many facts did you include correctly
Right.
and on the right side of the table, either
Right.
for or against?
This is definitely going to generate a much wider range of responses. It also does seem to open the door to really bad ideas
Oh
that
yeah,
you could
you
include.
just spill your personal
Yeah.
what is it, like
Yeah.
biases and hyperbole and whatever. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you could as a staunch libertarian, I believe that the government should play no role whatsoever in funding higher education, blah, blah, blah. If
Yeah.
you, or whatever, just picking any one political
Group. You can pick
perspective,
any
but
team. Yep.
you could start off, if you start off real strong from your perspective, then it's like, wow, okay, this person is leaning very heavily on their own personal shit. I have a feeling that's probably a bad look. I don't think that's where I would go with it. I would go with an academic response, responding to, like, I would be analyzing pros and cons of the perspectives offered.
I
I
think
think
you want
that's
to
what I
make
would
a
do.
strong argument, but you
Yes.
want to make it seem highly fact and reason driven.
Yeah. One caveat on this prompt in particular.
Yeah, talking to and about colleges. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that it seems unlikely to me that the actual prompt that they're going to give you, I mean, and we won't know until people start telling us what their prompt was on their actual new LSAT writing.
Yeah.
But it seems fraught to me that this prompt is about, it's asking a very specific question.
Are
Again,
schools useful? No, they're not.
yeah. To what extent do colleges and universities serve their students' best interests when they emphasize career preparation? If you started off with like, I don't think colleges and universities are serving their students' best interest at all with, XYZ, it's like, whoa, okay. So you're a rabble
Let me tell you
rouser.
what happened to me when I was in college. Oh, great.
Exactly. And this is why I was involved in several lawsuits against the administration of my former, it's funny, right? Because we're laughing about like, oh my God, I can't imagine that someone would ever do that. But we're only laughing about that because we've seen people write personal statements that are like that.
They do write that. And they're so trapped in their perspective that they can't see how anyone would see things differently or how they could not have sympathy for them.
I'm going to say that's a very bad look. If you present yourself as a biased, impassioned warrior for one view of reality without the ability to acknowledge that there might be other views.
Other
I
realities.
Think, yeah. I just think that makes you look like a weak advocate. As much as you think you're showing passion, but it's not a good lawyer.
No, you're showing myopia, right? Or myopia
right.
or whatever. Yeah.
To be a good lawyer, you have to be able to acknowledge that your client could lose. And so that's what I think I would steer clear of here, is that you can make an argument that still looks at pros and cons and acknowledges that there's not necessarily a right answer. Now, you can marshal facts and you can present a strong argument in favor of one position over the other. But there's a fine line between that and, just like completely ignoring facts that are against you or stating moral absolutes that aren't, necessarily part of the agreed upon record.
I agree.
Okay, this was Valerie. Thank you, Valerie, LSAT Demon Live student Valerie, who submitted this.
Okay. So again, the key question is, to what extent do colleges and universities serve their students' best interests when they emphasize career preparation? Okay. Here's her response. Colleges and universities best serve their students' interests by emphasizing career preparation over a broader range of knowledge. Okay. You've taken your position up front. I like that you're not hiding your stance.
Clearly following the directions. You are writing an argumentative essay, not a book report, not a, well, there are many competing perspectives on this issue. I mean, that's not what I want you to do. I do want you to later consider perspectives, but at the top, I want a clear statement of your perspective, because that indicates to me that you have read and are following the prompt.
Yeah. The prompt did say to what extent. And so I like that you're taking a clear position, but I almost wonder if there's going to be a need for more nuance here. But, anyways, under a career oriented education in these upper level institutions, students gain the practical skills, knowledge, and training necessary to prepare them to succeed in their chosen field of study. Okay. Next paragraph. Having faced the recent COVID-19 pandemic and global inflation, the rise in unemployment globally has set the younger generations back. That sentence is not grammatically correct.
Okay, why?
So the first part, I believe, is called, I don't know what it's called actually, it's a hanging modifier or something like that. But it says, having faced the recent COVID-19 pandemic and global inflation. So you need something to have faced that. Right now, the subject is the rise in
Right.
unemployment.
The
So
rise in
that,
unemployment is a result of that,
yeah,
not something that faced that. So yes, that is a bad sentence. And
that needs to be the younger generation faced.
yep. So
Yeah.
there we need to be really careful about the construction of our sentences. One easy fix for that is to stick with sentence constructions that start with the subject of the sentence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you just write subject, verb, subject, verb, you're not going to mess that up. If you start your sentences with these weird comma separated clauses, you do get yourself into a pickle. I wanted to also maybe push back on the factual basis of this. I was reading in the Times just today that there has been a recent rise in unemployment, which gets us back to the typical healthy levels of unemployment, because
Yeah.
economists believe that there is a healthy 4% or something like that unemployment because you do need liquidity in the workforce marketplace.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that there was a huge spike in unemployment right at the beginning of the pandemic. And then it actually reversed itself because so much government money flooded into the economy
Yeah.
after the pandemic
Yep.
that unemployment was perilously low in 2022, 23. And that's why we had crazy inflation during those years.
Yeah. Isn't that what the Great Resignation was? Because everybody's like, hey, this isn't good enough for me. I'm going to go somewhere else.
Because there were but that's because there were so
So
many
many
other
jobs.
competing jobs out there. And so I'm not sure, like, I think you're stating something there as a fact without citing anybody on that. And I do think that some of your readers are going to go, wait, that's not factually correct. At least that's my response to that.
Okay. Yeah, I am going to say two more things, and I must be wrong here, but your your sentences seem a little longer and academic than I would prefer. And the way you started your paper could be exactly, what you knew you should do and you did it, but it's also the exact way that ChatGPT responds to questions. So when you ask ChatGPT a question, it repeats exactly back to you what you're asking and then goes into its answer.
Hmm.
So did you use ChatGPT to give yourself some ideas on how to structure this? Not a good, I don't know if you did or didn't, but if anyone is thinking about doing that, don't, because you can't do that on test day. You got to learn to generate these ideas from yourself.
Sure. Yeah. And I think you're wrong about that. I'd be surprised. I mean, I believe you that that is what a GPT response would
It's
start
not
with.
just that. It's these sentences seem overly academic to me. And I'm sorry, but it's what I'm seeing when
Interesting.
I read this. So,
Okay.
but let's keep going. I obviously don't know, and I believe otherwise, but the text, if I knew nothing else, would suggest that to me. This next sentence says the world saw a record breaking number of young people fresh out of university, unable to find jobs or, quote, settling for lower level positions than those they were promised when they entered university. Okay, so kind of doubling down on this idea of unemployment or underemployment. Therefore, universities ought to pivot toward preparing students for their careers and ever evolving economic reality.
To me, at this point, I'm like looking for a citation. I'm just kind of, and I'm not saying you need to actually cite, but you're two full paragraphs in, and part of the instructions were to consider the perspectives that were offered. This feels to me like you're, this feels heavy on opinion. Your position was already stated in the first sentence,
Mm-hmm.
which was great. I love that you stated an opinion in the first sentence. But two full paragraphs, like there's a couple of uncited factual claims. Then there is another restatement of your position in the last sentence of the second paragraph. Universities ought to pivot toward preparing students for their careers, and then a very vague and ever evolving economic reality, which is like, my edit would be just cut that
Yeah.
last part of that sentence. It just doesn't, it's like, okay, where are we going with this? Like, you've said what you want. I don't know.
Yeah.
Third paragraph?
Third paragraph. Admittedly, a broad range of important areas of knowledge would allow students to test and verify their values.
Hmm.
However, such personal development could happen more holistically outside of school through, for example, social interactions, reading, and traveling without being financially or otherwise constrained. On the other hand, the money spent on education should provide students with more unique, hard to obtain information and practical skills that could only be acquired through education and experience.
You know, there's a lot to like there. I do like that you're acknowledging other perspectives there at the beginning of that third paragraph.
Yeah.
I think that these sentences are well written enough that this would totally pass muster. Except for that the first sentence of the second paragraph, which was in error, as you noted,
Mm-hmm.
grammatically in error. I think that so far through three paragraphs, it's not like an instant deny, right?
Yeah.
Which, if it's not an instant deny, it's probably perfectly fine. Because I think that schools are going to use this still. It's not scored. It's not part of your 120 to 180. I don't think anybody's going to write such a great argumentative LSAT writing that
Yeah.
it gets them in despite their bad LSAT, bad GPA. I don't think that's what's happening here. I think that people are reading it as a reality check. Did you write your own personal statement? Can you put sentences together in a reasonable amount of time? Can you respond to this prompt without help and look like someone who can write in English?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see anything here that would be like an instant nope.
Yeah. I I agree. What I'm uneasy about three paragraphs in right now is I feel like, and this comes back to my chat GPT comment, not that I'm saying you're using it, but the vibe to me is the same. It's high level,
Mm,
and it feels, especially ever evolving economic reality. But even this, a broad range of important areas of knowledge, vague, would allow students to test and verify their values. Like I would love for this to get more concrete
yeah.
and talk about a specific area and
Yeah.
then extrapolate that to the general instead of just staying general, which is what I feel like these AI tools do.
It's extremely vague. It's extremely general. The last sentence of that third paragraph, on the other hand, the money spent on education should provide students with more unique, hard to obtain information and practical skills that could only be acquired through education and experience.
Yes, but you have no
What?
idea what those are. Yeah.
What are you talking about? Like, what unique, hard to obtain information are we talking about? The prompt allowed you to bring in anything from your own experience. And I
Mhm.
feel like that's a thing that is so far missing here, is that like you're giving me your opinions in broad general terms, but you are the authority on your life and your experience. And you have an opportunity here to say, for example, when I was working at the ice cream stand in high school, I learned that other people are going to steal money out of the till, or whatever it is.
Yeah,
Like
totally.
you could have
No.
cited literally anything from any job you've ever had. Instead, you have chosen to cite unique, hard to obtain information that the reader might just be sitting there going like, "Wait, what are we talking about?"
Yeah, no, totally. So here's another example. When I was in college, my freshman year, my older brother told me, "Hey, you should take an econ class." I found it very helpful when I was in college. So I signed up for Econ 110. It was super eye-opening to me, and then I ended up majoring in econ. Would I have chosen that path by any means if I had not been in school? Probably not. I probably would have chosen other areas to focus on. That's not an argument to say schools should stay how they are necessarily, but it's a concrete example of saying, okay, here's one benefit of exposing people to lots of different areas of knowledge because they have no fucking clue what they're going to like or not like. And you
Yeah.
are saying that, but I would prefer this to be expressed through a concrete example and then drawing a
Yeah.
general conclusion from that.
Because instead, she went with the very vague allow students to test and verify their values, which the verify their values also kind of made me scratch my head because it was
Yeah.
like, wait, I
Value
thought,
of what?
right. I don't really get what you're saying there. So, okay. So we're 3 paragraphs in. We have a strong statement of your opinion. So you are writing an argumentative essay. I think the sentences are mostly fine. I don't think it has to be perfect. It's not like your personal statement, which should be perfect. This, they know that there's going to be little goofs, and that goof that was made in the first sentence of the second paragraph is like something that is just very routine. I mean, you see that all the time in everybody's writing. So I'm not surprised by that. And I don't think that would be an instant deal breaker. The thing that's missing here is it doesn't seem like you're leveraging the width of the prompt, which allows you to, it actually requires you to cite perspectives, which you haven't done yet. And we're now 60% through the prompt or the response, 3 out of 5 paragraphs completed. And you have not
maybe
yet followed.
halfway, 6 paragraphs, but yeah.
Oh, it's 6 paragraphs. Oh, sorry. There's one on the third page.
Yeah.
So halfway through and you have not yet ticked that box of I'm following the prompt.
Yep. Okay.
So that's missing.
Agreed. So here's the 4th paragraph. It starts out, perspective 3 argues that higher education perpetuates social stratification that extends beyond financial barriers. Okay.
Interesting. I like it. You're citing one of the perspectives. That box has now been ticked.
Yeah.
What do you think about using perspective 3? It does seem like a useful shorthand.
I would much rather it be a reference to the person who wrote not their name. I'm just saying some educators have argued. If you want to make it really clear for the reader, you could say, as outlined in perspective 3, some educators have argued this. So it becomes grounding. Yeah.
They don't give you the name. They don't actually give you, I don't know what textbook this came from. I don't know who the author is. The perspective that they give you is actually just one paragraph the whole thing is in quotation marks, but they're not telling you where the quote comes from other than an excerpt from a textbook on the sociology of education. I think maybe what you could have done there is you could have said, according to one textbook on the sociology of education.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
And then quote it or paraphrase it. But I actually don't hate the idea of just saying perspective 3, since that is actually the closest, like you can't really cite it better than that.
True. But I guess what I like about it, it's sort of, okay. So when I was before doing LSAT Demon, I was helping people with legal writing consulting, right?
Yep.
We had Ross Gruberman on the show. You can check that out if you want to. But one of the things that he taught me was when you introduce an agency, for example, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, right?
Okay.
you might introduce it and you might give it its full title, but later you just simply refer to it as the agency,
Mm.
right? But attorneys who are so hyper concerned about being 100% accurate repeatedly refer to the agency either by its full title or by its full, all its letters, its acronym or its initialism or whatever. And it becomes grating, right? It's like just talk in a normal voice like you would to a person. So here, I might want to point out that it's perspective 3 so the reader doesn't miss. But I would say, as outlined in perspective 3, one textbook argues. It gives a little more natural context to the introduction. I mean,
or you could have said, again, the way I probably would have done it is, according to one textbook on the sociology of education, blah, blah, blah. Then maybe in the next sentence you say, this perspective says, and so now you're not like awkwardly saying perspective 3.
3. Yeah.
You're just, but you are clearly signaling that you're following the prompt.
There's some readers too who aren't going to remember, which perspective was which. And now you're just like helping them even more. And
guaranteed
like
the readers aren't going to give one shit about which perspective was which thing. They're looking, can you write an argumentative essay that cites sources?
Yep.
Okay.
So she continues, although that is true to a certain extent. Wait, what is true? That higher education perpetuates social stratification that extends beyond financial barriers. Although that is true to a certain extent, college and undergraduate programs have become progressively more accessible, witnessed by the large numbers of first-generation applicants, which only reinforces the idea that education in these higher education institutions should be focused more on career readiness.
So again, citing a fact here, large numbers of first-generation applicants. I wonder if that came from one of the perspectives, or are you just stating that from your own outside knowledge? Just a question that the reader is left with. Not sure that's good or bad.
Having large proportions of the population with graduate degrees that teach broad knowledge and skills creates a society with uniform ideas, skills, and abilities.
Graduate degrees?
Yeah, wait, are we talking about undergrad or grad school, graduate degrees? Also, is uniform good or bad? It almost sounds like in this context, it's being presented as a good thing, but that could also be seen as a bad thing. Everybody thinks the same. Such a society cannot foster debate and diversity and erodes the fundamental principles of education, which lay upon critical thinking.
So at this point, for my taste, there's too much broad statement of fact.
Too much, overarching generalities about the universe as opposed to down to the earth. Hey, look, this is what happened for this person and therefore is likely to happen for many other people.
I mean, maybe it's true that the fundamental principles of education lay upon critical thinking.
I don't know, man.
But is that self-evident or I don't know. There are a lot of those claims.
But even if it's true, what does that mean? Okay, so then do you foster, how does that relate to the question? Do you foster more skills-based training or do you foster more? I don't know.
It was a very broad question. To what extent do colleges and universities serve their students' best interests when they emphasize career preparation? But I would prefer a response that, I think you got to dial down the opinion. You got to dial down the statement of broad facts without any kind of reference. And instead, or citation or anything. And instead, I think, you're allowed to cite your own experience. They specifically said that you can cite your own experience. And you're not citing your own experience. At least you could have used the first person at some point, and you have not used that perspective. So the one authority, you've got two authorities that you can safely cite here, which is all the perspectives that you were given, plus your own personal perspective. And all these broad statements of fact, I'm not sure what you're doing.
Hey, I would change what you just said. You said you can cite the four perspectives and your own personal perspective. That's technically true, but I would encourage people to change it. You can cite those four perspectives and your personal experience.
Yes, experience. Well, they told you, even they said that you can cite like your moral perspective.
Uh,
I think that's probably something that you should maybe steer away from
yeah,
mostly and instead focus on, I agree, Ben, focus on your personal experience.
yeah.
Stuff that you did, stuff that you saw, stuff that you have actually experienced. Nobody can argue with you about those perspectives. And if you're
Yep.
citing your own personal perspective, it's just like you're rock solid. So why not that? Or why not spend more time citing the perspectives that you were given? You were given four of them.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it looks like you've done the minimum here of citing one of the perspectives once. I don't know. Maybe they'll get back to citing more of those perspectives.
Okay, we got two more paragraphs. This is the fifth one. Additionally, higher education began with the intention of providing this necessarily additional skills and perspectives than those provided in high school or lower levels of education.
That's a bad sentence.
Yeah.
I think maybe the word this needs to be omitted. Additionally, higher education began with the intention of providing necessarily additional skills and perspectives than those provided in high school or lower level. I don't know what that sentence is meant to be, but at this point now, that if they made it this far, and they might not, honestly, they might have read the first few paragraphs and gone, okay, following the prompt looks like a native English writer, good enough.
Yep.
You know, we're reading this because we like your LSAT, we like your GPA, we like your personal statement, we like your resume, we've read your letters of recommendation, you've checked all the boxes, we want to admit you. After three paragraphs or four paragraphs here, it was like, okay, reality check, totally fine, not blowing me away, but also not scaring me off. You're good. Then that sentence, though, if that came earlier in the passage, I would be worried.
Yeah. And I could see how some of these writing samples could come in a lot stronger because there's so much more flexibility, right? The prompt specifically asks, to what extent do schools serve their best interests when they pursue skills based training or whatever? And I haven't really got a sense of the extent, right? But you could come in and start talking about, okay, well, there are thousands of people at any given institution, and a certain percent of them are going to benefit from a more academic focus, and a certain percentage of them are going to actually benefit more from a skills based focus. So, to the extent which you help that percentage of the population, which I think could be some percentage, like there's so many different ways you could approach this, and some people are going to get closer to nailing that prompt, and some people are going to be just talking about the same topic but getting further away.
Hmm.
um, I'm going to keep going,
Yeah.
but we're almost done. By leveling the playing field to a broad context of learning at university level, students begin to seek further education and graduate degrees to differentiate themselves from their peers.
Again, with the graduate degrees, I thought they were asking you in the prompt specifically about undergrad. To go back to the purpose of college.
And
The principal
universities,
aim
yeah.
of an undergraduate liberal arts education has traditionally been blah, blah, blah. Do you think undergraduate schools should shift toward skills based education? I guess the case that you're making here is, huh,
I don't know, actually. I've kind of lost the thread. And maybe that's just
yeah.
because we're commenting on this so much, but it must be an argument for skills based training because that's what her position is.
But she's doing that by complaining about graduate degrees. So you're saying because we have leveled, okay, I get it. Because you've leveled the playing field to broad learning at the university level, then students want to go get graduate degrees to differentiate themselves, and you're going to complain. Go ahead, Ben.
This arguably creates a class divide between those who can afford to specialize beyond their undergraduate and those who need to enter the workforce after graduation and cannot compete with applicants who obtained further education.
Sentence is too long. It's got a couple of ands in it. You could have cut that down into one or more sentences. Maybe we should continue though.
Yeah, this class divide is bigger than any divide created by undergraduate degrees in certain countries, which, as explained above, has shrunk extensively in recent years.
Was that explained above?
What? What? I thought it had expanded.
Well, I don't remember. What certain countries are we talking about now?
I don't know. I don't know.
Was that in a perspective that you thought you were citing, but you didn't actually cite, or what? Because, man, you're doing like comparisons now of the class divide in some countries versus other countries. And I don't remember that in the record. You haven't cited it in your essay. I'm just not sure what you're talking about now. Last paragraph.
Yeah, last paragraph. In conclusion, universities should focus on career preparation and skills development rather than a broader context of knowledge. Specialized education would allow better prospects for graduates, which is now more than ever needed in a society stricken by unemployment. Not stricken by unemployment.
I think this is like a sort of betraying a bias in your own sources of news.
Well, it's also fundamentally a problem with talking about society in general rather than your own personal experience.
Yeah. Okay. What I like about it, you
Yeah.
stated you clearly were you were answering the prompt with you gave your opinion in the first paragraph, you gave your opinion in the last paragraph. If someone glances at this, they go, you're writing in English, sentences are mostly good, you're following the prompts. Like that a lot. You cited a perspective. I like that a lot. What I don't like about it, I think you cited way too much broad statements of fact that I don't know where they're in the record, and some of them I might not agree with. You failed completely to cite your own personal experience, which they opened that door for you, and all you had to do was pull one experience from your own actual life, and it would have like crystallized your opinion, or you could have brought it to life by giving me an example from you or maybe one of your kids or a coworker or anybody else that you've actually experienced their experience of life. And you could have made this whole thing sing with that. The other thing that I think is missing here is it seems like you did the bare minimum by citing one of the perspectives. It's like you ticked the box reluctantly instead of just really using those perspectives to show competing arguments. And maybe that's what you meant to do with this whole thing about certain countries or whatever. Like maybe that was in the perspectives. There was something there that I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. No, I agree with all those points. I don't have anything to add.